In the forgotten folds of Japan's Iya Valley, nestled deep among mist-choked mountains and hairpin roads where cell signals die and even birds seem cautious to sing, lies the village of Nagoro. It is a place most maps no longer mark, and locals in nearby towns pretend not to remember. At a glance, Nagoro feels like a village suspended in time. Untouched, serene, melancholic, but look closer, and something gnaws at the soul. The people you think you see in Nagoro, the figures standing by the roadside, sitting on porches and peering from second-story windows, aren't people at all. They're dolls, hundreds of them. Maybe thousands, human-sized, dressed in old kimonos and faded work clothes, slumped in the abandoned schoolhouse, huddled in rows like students long since dismissed, their lifeless button eyes staring straight ahead. Some lean against the sides of homes with gaping roofs, as if waiting for owners who will never return. Others are posed in mid-action, a man with a fishing rod at the edge of a stream, a woman frozen in a sweeping motion on a rusted porch, all eerily silent, all too still. This is what drew Jun Suzuki, a Tokyo-based content creator with a taste for the weird and unsettling, to Nagoro. A YouTuber known for his urban exploration series Ruins of Japan, Jun hunted forgotten places with heavy histories, hoping to turn views into sponsorships and his fascination with decay into a career. His channel had blown up after he documented an abandoned mental hospital near Kyoto, and since then he had been chasing increasingly darker legends. When someone left a cryptic comment under one of his videos, "Forget the hospital, go to Nagoro. The dolls are the least of what's there." He packed his gear and left the next day. He arrived in Nagoro just after dusk, the sun bleeding behind the mountains in streaks of crimson. The village was quieter than he'd imagined. There were no cars, no barking dogs, no generators humming, just the sound of wind combing through dry bamboo and the occasional soft creak of wood shifting under its own age. He parked at the edge of the village and began to film his opening monologue, the camera panning across fields of weeds, where rice once grew in overgrown paths leading to sagging wooden homes. As he stepped deeper into the village, Jun felt something strange, not fear exactly, but a kind of watching. The dolls were everywhere. Each turn revealed more. He had seen photos online, but none had prepared him for the sheer number and the detail. Some had glass eyes, others had fingernails. A few wore expressions too subtle, too personal, like someone had tried to capture not just a face, but a soul. One doll, posed as a grandmother on a porch, seemed to watch him as he passed. When he turned to look again, her head had slightly tilted. Or maybe it hadn't. Maybe it was the light, or the weight of his imagination. The house he had marked for his overnight stay was on the far side of the village, an old guest house that hadn't been used in over a decade. Jun had seen pictures of it in an old travel blog. Its roof had partially collapsed, but one room in the back remained intact enough to camp in. He set up a camera facing the window for a time-lapse, recorded some B-roll of the kitchen strewn with dusty teacups, and finally settled in with his sleeping bag and a can of warm coffee. Before falling asleep, he whispered into the camera, "Let's see if the sisters come out tonight." The name had come up several times already in his research, always vague, always in passing. In a Reddit thread about abandoned places in Japan, one user had written, "Don't go to the house with the dolls in the well. That's where the sisters lived." Another comment on an old tourism site read, "Locals said two girls used to live near the shrine, never aged, never spoke, used to invite travelers in for tea." There were no records of sisters living in Nagoro, but there was a photo, a black and white image posted on an obscure forum titled Yamabito Truths. In it, two girls stood outside what looked like a shrine. They wore matching white kimonos. Their faces were blank, their hair thick and long. The strange part wasn't their expressionless faces, or the fact that they looked identical. It was the timestamp. The photo had been taken in 1952, but Jun had found another, buried in a digital archive of tourism brochures from different year. Same sisters, same clothes, same expression. They hadn't aged a day. That night, the wind grew heavier, the air colder. Jun awoke once to what he thought was the sound of footsteps on gravel. He checked the window, but saw nothing. Except, no, He was sure one of the dolls he had filmed earlier, a woman in a blue apron by the road, now sat in the middle of the path facing the guest house. He laughed it off, even spoke to the camera. "Someone's playing games with me, real original." But inside he felt the prickling chill of something unseen, something old, watching. At dawn he decided to venture to the shrine. He had seen it the day before, half buried by vines at the edge of a wooded path. Local maps didn't label it, and none of the homes around it were occupied. In fact, most of them were boarded shut, as if the villagers had wanted to trap something inside. The shrine was smaller than he expected, its torii gate crooked and rotted. Dolls lined the entrance, all of children, posed with offerings. Some were holding rotten fruit. One held a half-melted candle. The air around the shrine was foul, heavy with a metallic tang. As he stepped closer, June's camera picked up a strange static, intermittent and pulsing, like a breath. He entered the shrine and found nothing but dust, old tatami mats, and a rusted cauldron in the center. The walls were covered in faded murals. One depicted two girls standing over a fire. Another showed something darker, human figures dismembered, their limbs laid out in symmetrical circles. At the back of the room, hidden behind a half-broken wall, he found a photograph. Same sisters, but this time in color. The picture was recent, maybe only a few years old. They stood in front of the shrine, still no signs of aging, but their faces had changed. Not older, just more alert, aware. As he lifted the camera to record, June heard a laugh behind him, small, girlish. It wasn't the wind. He spun around. The shrine was empty, but the dolls outside had moved. Every single one now faced the shrine. And then, silent. He backed out slowly, breath caught in his throat, heart jackhammering against his ribs. When he reached the road, the doll with the blue apron was gone. He ran back to the guest house, grabbed his gear, and started for his car. As he passed the schoolhouse, something caught his eye. Inside, among the lifeless figures of students and teachers, two were missing their heads. In their place, cameras. His cameras, the ones he had lost earlier while filming. He didn't look back. That night, June uploaded the footage he had taken to a private server. He didn't edit, didn't add titles or narration, just raw files. And then he disappeared. No one has heard from June since. His channel remains live. Every month a new video is uploaded. Just 10 seconds of footage. A glimpse of a forest. A whisper in Japanese. A pair of pale feet stepping across wet stone. The most recent one showed a doll sitting on a porch, dressed in a blue apron. Next to it were two girls, smiling, unmoving. The rain came down hard the night after June's final video. Not the kind of rain that washes things clean. This was the kind that soaked into the bones of the valley and stirred up what had been buried for decades. It fell like punishment. The village of Nagoro remained still beneath it. The dolls hunched over like mourners frozen in place, their fabric bodies growing soggy, slumping slightly as if listening. Miles away in the nearby town of Miyoshi, an old woman named Shiori Nakamura sat silently in a tatami room lit by a flickering fluorescent bulb. She watched June's video on a borrowed tablet. The volume turned low. Her gnarled fingers trembled, not from age but memory. She had seen those faces before, not on YouTube, not in photos, but in person, long ago. Faces that did not change, faces that smiled too widely, and always during the full moon. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, as if something had finally broken loose inside her, she whispered, "They've woken up again." Shiori had grown up just outside Nagoro during the war. The village, even back then, was strange, quiet, isolated. But it was after 1943 when things truly a group of wounded soldiers had gone missing while passing through. Everyone had assumed they'd taken refuge in the mountains, maybe died of their wounds or deserted. But then more travelers vanished. Peddlers, strangers, once even a mail courier. Their horses were found, but never their body. Just scraps, torn fabric, the occasional blood-soaked satchel. Officials came and chalked it up to wolves, but there were no wolves in Nagoro. Shiori remembered that year too clearly. She had been 14 when she saw them, the sisters. They had lived at the edge of the village, near the forest, in a house that looked like it hadn't been built so much as grown out of the ground. It was old, even back then, older than anyone could date. The sisters were always together, walking in perfect step, their long black hair swaying like silk. They never spoke to anyone, never went to the temple, but they were always smiling, always polite. They invited guests to tea. The guests never came out again. No one in the village ever questioned it aloud. They were too afraid. Something about the sisters made your skin crawl, even when they were simply standing there barefoot on the mossy path, heads tilted in curiosity like dolls waiting to be played with. There was a scent around them, always a mix of flowers and something else, something warm and iron-heavy. The villagers struck a silent bargain, unspoken but understood. They would leave the sisters alone, and they would not interfere with their guests. And so, for decades, the pattern repeated. During every full moon, someone would go missing, always someone from outside, a drifter, a biker, a lost tourist, no one too important, no one who would be searched for deeply. And each time, the smell would come back to the village, the same metallic sweetness, faint and sickening, smoke from their chimney, and laughter, like children at play giggling through the dark. It was in the late 60s when something changed. One night, the laughter stopped, the smoke ceased, the sisters vanished, their home collapsed into the forest, as if swallowed whole. Some said they had moved on, others believed they had simply returned to sleep, like snakes under stone. And now, after all this time, they were awake again. Shiori leaned forward and opened a drawer beside her futon. Inside, carefully wrapped in oilcloth, was a faded photograph, the only one she had ever kept from her youth. It showed her father and two other villagers standing nervously in front of the sisters' home. The girls were in the background, partially obscured by trees, but there they were, white kimonos, identical, and even in that old photo, their eyes seemed wrong. That week, as the moon waxed full once more, a hiker named Rakata live-streamed his solo journey through Aya Valley. He wasn't looking for urban legends. He didn't believe in such things. He was a nature enthusiast, one of those wholesome YouTubers who filmed waterfalls and birdsong. But the mountains were silent that day. He noted it in his video. No insects, no birds, even the streams quiet today. Weird. At 2:08 a.m., during his night camp stream, something moved just beyond the edge of his light. A shape, two, maybe, pale outlines against the black forest. He panned his camera. Nothing there. But then a frame, just one, captured them. A pair of girls, standing side by side on the path. Their faces pale, blank, smiling. The screen glitched, audio distorted into static, and then the stream cut out entirely. His channel hasn't posted since. Reddit exploded with speculation, glitches, ARGs, deep fakes. But one user uploaded a slowed-down frame-by-frame analysis. The image was grainy but clear enough. The timestamp on Rise footage, August 2nd, 20. A side-by-side comparison was posted next to the photo from 1952. It was them, the same girls, same kimonos, same smiles, unaged, unchanged. The village of Nagoro was placed under quiet lockdown by local authorities the next day. Not officially. No news report, no press statement, but a few backpackers who tried to hike into the area were turned away by unmarked vehicles. One claimed he saw men in suits carrying large cases and motion detectors. Online, whispers spread. Nagoro had always been odd, but this was different. One post, quickly deleted, claimed that bones had been found near the shrine. Hundreds. Small bones, finger bones, jaw bones, skull fragments with strange symbols carved into them, kanji like hunger and gift. Shiori, now bedridden, gave her final interview to an independent journalist, before slipping into silence again. She didn't say much, just one story. From the spring of, she had followed a crying sound into the woods. Late one night, her neighbor's baby had gone missing earlier that day. Everyone thought a fox had taken it, but she heard it, wailing, echoing between the trees. She followed the sound to the sister's home. The door was open. Inside she found one sister held the baby, gently rocking it. The other stirred a pot over a fire. The smell was unbearable. Meat and blood and herbs. The baby stopped crying. Shiori didn't scream. She didn't move. She simply backed away into the darkness. She never told anyone what she saw, but her hair turned white at 15. She finished her story with a warning. They sleep for years, but they never die. They are not human. They never were. They were made for this place. And now that you've spoken their names again, they're listening.
That night a final post appeared on Ryakata's abandoned channel, 10 seconds long, shake footage of the forest floor, rain dripping onto moss. In the distance, two figures walking hand in hand. And just before the clip ends, a single phrase in a soft, childish voice, "We're still hungry," and then black. For weeks, silence hung over Nagoro like a low fog, thick and oppressive. The air carried something strange, not the scent of rot or smoke, but an absence, as if something had been taken away. The remaining residents, those too old or too stubborn to leave, kept their doors bolted shut at night, their lights dimmed, and their prayers whispered with trembling mouths. They all knew the signs, they had seen them before. And then came Ren. Unlike June, Ren wasn't a thrill seeker or a vlogger. He was a cultural anthropologist, soft-spoken and methodical, working on a project about Japan's vanishing villages and their oral traditions. Nagoro was to be a chapter, maybe two. His intention was pure. Interviews, history, quiet documentation of a dying place. He had no interest in ghosts, but ghosts had an interest in him. Ren arrived in late August, just days after the live stream incident, unaware of the recent disappearance. The government had buried the story under layers of silence. No official news reports, no police briefings, just rumors, scattered forum threads, and a deep digital coldness that followed any mention of Nagoro sisters. If Ren had stumbled across those whispers, he didn't pay them any mind. He stayed in the same guest house June had used, cleaned it up, and set up a small workspace. His first days were productive, photographing the dolls, recording ambient sound, comparing dialects from nearby villages. But something began to bother him almost immediately. The dolls, they moved. Not drastically, not like scenes from a horror movie, but subtly, quietly. During the night, they shifted. A child doll that had faced the river would be looking up the road the next morning. A man doll on a bench would now be standing, arms lowered, unnaturally at his side. At first Ren chalked it up to animal activity, wind, maybe, or the shifting of old fabric in damp weather. But then he found the journal. It was hidden in the old schoolhouse, wedged beneath a floorboard behind the teacher's desk. The journal was wrapped in cloth, bound in fading leather, and smelled of smoke and dust. On the cover was a name written in delicate brushstroke, Ayako. Ayako, as Ren would later learn, was not a teacher, nor a student. She was the doll maker. The journal began benignly enough. Observations about daily life, notes about materials used for stuffing and sewing, but the entries quickly grew stranger. September 12, 1943. They come to me again, the sisters. They say I must make more, so the village does not die. But these are not toys. These are copies. They must look exactly right. October 3, 1943. They brought me the hair.
So black.
So soft. I ask where it comes from. They only smile. October 28, 1943. I am not just a doll maker anymore. I am a preserver, a witness. They feed. I sew. Ren felt a chill as he read, flipping through page after page of cryptic entries. Some were written backwards, others included diagrams, disturbing ones, of dolls with anatomical precision, labeled like medical drawings, muscles, tendons, skin, and then there were lists, names, dates, ages. Most were not local. Ren cross-referenced one of the names with old municipal records in Miyoshi. The girl had gone missing in 1958, while traveling through the valley with her parents. Her remains were never found. In the back of the journal was a map, hand-drawn and almost childlike. It depicted the layout of Nagoro as it once was, with a large circle marked in red on a hillside near the northern shrine. The only word written beside it was below. Ren of course went to find it. The path was overgrown and slick, the trees denser than they appeared on the map. But eventually, he reached the spot, a large stone slab half buried in moss, encircled by broken torii gates, and overgrown statues of Jizo, the Buddhist guardian of children. He didn't expect the slab to move, but when he pressed against it, it shifted with a deep groan of stone grinding against stone. Beneath it, stairs, old and narrow, descending into the earth. He should have stopped. He should have turned back, but he did. The air grew colder with each step, the light behind him dimming until he had to switch on his flashlight. The tunnel was carved crudely into the rock, the walls damp and lined with wooden prayer tags, most faded beyond legibility. After 10 minutes, the tunnel widened into a chamber. That's where he found it, Ayako's workshop. But this was no cozy artist studio. The space was large, cavernous. Bones were stacked in the corners, some stripped clean, others half wrapped in rotting cloth. Doll parts littered the room, limbs, heads, torsos, but these weren't made of cloth or stuffing. They were too real, too detailed. On one long table lay a fully assembled figure, a girl, 8, maybe 9 years old, eyes closed, skin pale and waxen. Ren stepped closer and realized the arms bore veins, hair follicles, wrinkles in the knuckles. Not a doll, not really. He staggered back, bile rising in his throat. In the far corner stood shelves of glass jars, each labeled with a name. Inside were pieces, a tooth, a braid, a dried tongue. This was not art. This was preservation. And in the center of the room, mounted like a grotesque shrine, was the final horror, a massive display of dolls arranged in a circle, holding hands. In the center stood 2 taller figures, identical, white kimonos, black hair.
Smiling, the sister. But these weren't just representations. They were coated in something. Preserved skin, perhaps. There were stains around the mouths, red, old, dried. Ren's light flickered, and then the laughter started, soft, childish, echoing from the tunnel behind him. He turned, heart pounding. 2 figures stood in the entrance, backlit, unmoving. He dropped the journal, ran past them, didn't look back. He made it to the village by morning, packed his things without even shutting off the camera. He drove straight to Tokyo, didn't sleep for 2 days, uploaded what he could, contacted no one. He died a week later, heart failure, the report said, 33 years old, no prior issues. His footage was never released, but someone leaked a single frame from his video, a still taken inside the chamber. It shows the table, the girl, and in the shadows behind the shelves, movement, a blur of black hair, a face, smiling. Since then the dolls in Nagoro have changed again. New ones appear that no one remembers placing. A foreign man in hiking gear, a young woman with a camera, a boy in a school uniform, each perfectly crafted, each uncannily lifelike. The villagers no longer ask who makes them. They already know. The sisters are awake, and Ayako never stopped sewing. Do you like this personality? Wait. The rain stopped. The clouds thinned. The moon came full, and with it, the sisters returned. It began quietly, the way evil always seems to seep in unnoticed. Lights flickering in empty houses, dead phones with voicemails that never recorded, dreams shared by strangers who had never met, all describing the same 2 figures, pale girls, standing barefoot at the edge of the forest, holding hands, smiling. In Tokyo, a moderator for a horror forum received a private message from an anonymous user, just a link. No subject, no signature. The link led to an unlisted livestream titled simply, Nagoro Night. The screen showed a forest path illuminated by a single flashlight beam. Rain drizzled across the lens. A breathless male voice whispered, "Are you seeing this?" At first it was uneventful, shaky night footage of bamboo groves, rotting shrines, scattered dolls. Then at 22 minutes and 14 seconds in, the camera froze on 2 shapes at the base of a tree. They were dressed in white, unmoving. The voice on the stream said, "There's no way they're real." The shapes didn't react. Then the camera zoomed slightly, revealing details, faces, pale and childlike. Their eyes were open, their mouths curled in slow, glassy smiles, and then they moved. Not fast, not with malice, just a step. In perfect unison. The scream that followed wasn't the scream of terror. It was the scream of a man watching reality collapse in front of him. When myth crosses into flesh, the camera dropped to the ground. The video kept recording. For 37 more seconds, viewers saw leaves, shoes running, the sound of panicked breath, then silence, then that same childlike giggle from before, and then black. Within an hour, the video was taken down. The link dead, the account deleted, but those who watched it, and there were thousands, couldn't unsee it. The sisters weren't folklore anymore. They weren't blurry stories buried in rural gossip. They had form, motion, intent, and they had returned. That week, a pair of hikers vanished near the Iya River. A delivery driver never reached the village. The only sign of his presence, his truck parked neatly near the wooden bridge, doors locked, engine cold, keys in the ignition. In all three cases, authorities gave the same response: ongoing investigation, no comment. But it wasn't just Nagoro anymore. People reported sightings in nearby towns. Two girls, seen walking hand in hand at night, staring into windows, standing outside shrines at dawn, always silent, always smiling. One witness, a teenage boy in Oboke, swore he saw them outside his bedroom window at 3:00 a.m. He said they didn't move, didn't blink, but when he turned to get his phone and looked back, they were inside, standing at the foot of his. He woke up screaming in his front yard with no memory of how he got there. His family moved away the next day. In Tokyo, a paranormal podcast host received an anonymous email with no text, just an image attachment. The file name was Sisters. It showed a still from an old VHS tape, time-stamped night. The tape was from a documentary on abandoned villages in Japan. In the background of a slow pan across Nagoro's dilapidated schoolhouse, two girls stood in a window, watched. The host cross-referenced the image with June's footage from 2025. Perfect match. The same girls. No aging, no difference in clothing or expression, as if time bent around them. Theories exploded across the internet. Urban legend turned reality. Supernatural beings, cursed yokai, ancient cannibal cult preserved through ritual. But while the digital world speculated, the real world bled. Back in Nagoro, strange noises returned to the hills. Laughter echoing through the valley. Footsteps in empty rooms. And the dolls, they multiplied. Villagers swore new ones appeared every morning. Not just old villagers now, but strangers, travelers, tourists. One resident, Haruto Sano, woke to find a new doll in front of his home. It wore a red jacket, blue jeans. One of its eyes was glass, the other was real, human. Sano disappeared the next night. His house was found wide open, the kettle still boiling. Inside on the couch sat a new doll, wearing his clothes. In the city of Kochi, a local woman claimed her young daughter began speaking in a strange voice at night. Flat, emotionless. They walk, they eat, they feed on those who do not belong, the girl said. When her mother asked who taught her those words, the child replied, the girls in white. They live in my closet when the moon is full. Soon after, the girl vanished. No sign of forced entry, no broken lock, just an open window, and muddy footprints on the floor. Two pairs, small, barefoot. Ren's journal resurfaced around this time, the one recovered after his death. Pages had been scanned and anonymously posted to a hidden file-sharing site. Among them, one disturbing note stood out. They don't just eat flesh, they consume what makes us human. Our memories, our stories, they harvest us. And once you see them, once you acknowledge them, they find you, they mark you. That was when the dream reports began. Hundreds of users from across Japan began posting eerily similar dreams. Two girls, standing at the foot of the bed, smiling, speaking in whispers, saying only one thing: tell others, tell our story, feed us. The dreams were always the same, always ending in darkness. Some claimed they awoke with nosebleeds. One man woke with 2 long cuts down his back, as if marked. And then came the live stream. It wasn't hosted by a content creator. It wasn't promoted. It just appeared. A YouTube channel with no history went live, titled, "We Are Home Now." The footage was static, black and white. A single room, tatami floor, a candle burning low. In the center, 2 girls stood perfectly still. They didn't move, didn't speak. The feed ran for 12 minutes and 12 seconds. Then slowly, they looked into the camera. One blinked, then the screen went black. The next day, hundreds of viewers reported issues with their phones, glitches, crashes. Some claimed files had been wiped. A few said their camera rolls now included a new photo, a close-up of a doll, lifelike, eyes open, smiling. The sisters weren't content with Nagoro anymore. They had found the internet, found the stories being told, and that's what they wanted. They fed on memory, on myth, on fear, and with every post, every video, every whisper, they grew stronger. They were becoming real in more places, more sightings, more vanishings. The pattern grew. It wasn't just about the flesh anymore. They wanted to be remembered, and that in the end may be the most terrifying thing, because legends fade, but stories that eat never die. The forest was deathly silent. No birds, no wind, no cicadas humming through the leaves. The air felt thick, like it was holding its breath, waiting, and the trees, once a blanket of deep green, stood rigid and pale in the moonlight, like ancient sentinels, guarding something sacred or cursed. Elena Nakashima knew she shouldn't be there, but something had drawn her to Nagoro. Not curiosity, not adventure, not even fear. It was something deeper, a compulsion. Ever since she'd watched the grainy live stream, the one with the pale girls who stared into the lens, as if through time, she'd felt them, in her dream, in the corners of mirrors, in the back of her mind, watching, calling. Elena wasn't a believer in legends. She was a doctoral candidate in folklore and anthropology, trained to dissect stories, not surrender to them. But her hands shook as she followed the hand-drawn map she'd printed from an anonymous blog, a map that claimed to lead to the origin of it all, the place where the legend was born, buried, and fed. They called it the Shrine of Bone. The entrance was hidden behind a wall of tangled ivy, halfway up a moss-covered slope, just outside Nagoro's northern ridge. The opening, small, almost crawling-sized, was easy to miss. Elena had passed it twice before she saw the worn wooden placard, half buried in the earth. No writing, just a crude carving. Two girls, hand in hand, their faces scratched out. She dropped to her knees and crawled into the dark. The tunnel was tighter than she expected. Damp, claustrophobic, the scent of decay hung in the air, metallic and sweet. She clicked on her flashlight, and the beam swept across carved stone walls, covered in names, hundreds of them, etched with fingernails or knives. Some were fresh, others were worn into smooth scars too faded to read. She ran her fingers across one that still bled red when the tunnel ended in a chamber. Elena stepped inside, and froze. The floor was covered in bones, tiny ones, childlike, arranged in patterns, spirals, rings, symbols. Some had been painted red, others black. At the center of the room sat a low stone altar, and atop it rested two skulls, perfectly preserved, smaller than adult size, but far too pristine to be aged. Behind the altar stood a mural. Time had weathered much of the paint, but enough remained to see what had once been depicted, in horrific detail. Two girls, naked, blood-stained, kneeling before a crowd of villagers. In the mural, the villagers bowed low, offering what looked like body parts, hands, eyes, heart. The girls smiled as they consumed them, and behind the girls, shadowy figures with no faces, hundreds of them, watching, feeding through the girls. Somehow, Elena took photos. Each click echoed in the stillness. She didn't realize she was crying until her hand brushed her cheek and came away wet. There was a noise then, a breath, not hers. She spun around, light darting across the chamber, and saw it. Not a ghost, not a doll, but something in between. A figure stood at the far edge of the room, half hidden in shadow, pale skin stretched too tightly over bones, a kimono tattered and rotted, its head cocked slowly, like a curious bird. Behind it, another shape emerged, identical, smaller, but more solid. The sister. They stepped forward, in perfect unison, barefoot, never blinking, the same faces from the video, the same from the 1952 photo, the same from the mural, eternal, frozen, terrifying. Elena couldn't move. They didn't speak, but the air shifted around. Thoughts that weren't her own pressed into her mind, cold and alien. Do you see now? She couldn't answer. We were made from hunger. You feed us when you speak, when you write, when you fear. The more you remember us, the more we return. They didn't walk so much as glide close. Elena felt her legs tremble. Her flashlight flickered once, twice, and then died. Total darkness. But she could still feel them, smell them, sweet rot, and old smoke. A sudden burst of heat flashed behind her eyes. Images, memories, blood pooling on tatami mats, screams muffled by laughter, a headless doll being stitched back together, a child's ribcage carved into the shape of a lantern, the voices of villagers chanting, "We gave them strangers, we were safe." Elena screamed, and then, nothing, no sound, no pain, just cold. She woke outside the shrine entrance at dawn, lying on her back in the dirt,
her shoes missing, her hands scraped raw, her camera was gone, so was her phone. But something had been slipped into her jacket pocket. The sister's photograph, old, black and white, smiling. This time, she was in the photo too, standing between them. Elena never returned to the university. She deleted her research, vanished from public view, but once a month, always during the full moon, she would post a single photo online. Always dolls, always arranged in strange position. In one they were bowing before two identical dolls dressed in white. In another, they were building something, a throne, maybe from bones. Nobody knew where the photos were taken. GPS data was scrubbed, but people began to recognize certain trees, certain hills, always near forgotten villages, always remote. And then the photos stopped. The final post from her account was a video, just 10 seconds long. It showed a room, bare candlelit. On the floor dozens of dolls sitting in a circle, and at the center, Elena, still, eyes open, smile too wide. Viewers argued whether it was real, staged, art, but a few noted something disturbing. Her body was too perfect, skin too smooth, lips too still, like a doll. Those who downloaded the video reported strange things, dreams, static from their speakers, faces appearing in the background of their selfies, pairs of small footprints outside their windows, and one common phrase whispered in their sleep, "You saw us, now you belong to us." Back in Nagoro, a traveler arrived at the village during the harvest moon. He had heard the stories and wanted proof. He filmed everything, spoke to no one, just wandered. He never left. But weeks later, a new doll appeared at the schoolhouse, wearing his jacket, holding his camera. The footage on it was corrupted, all except the final clip. It showed him, standing in front of the shrine. Behind him, two girls, smiling, and in the background, just barely audible over the wind, "They built this place to remember us. Now we build with your bones." And the camera shut off. Rain had begun to fall, not heavy, just enough to turn the mountain soil to sludge and soak through the seams of Yuki Taira's boots. She didn't care. She had hiked 10 kilometers past the last paved road, slept in an abandoned post station, and crossed a rotting rope bridge over a canyon deep in Japan's forgotten interior. She was here for one reason only, to find out the truth about the harvest. Yuki wasn't a thrill seeker or urban legend junkie. She was a crime journalist. 3 years ago, her younger brother Jun disappeared while backpacking through the Shikoku region. His final text was sent from Nagoro. The police had written it off. He probably left to start a new life. But Yuki had read his journals. He wasn't suicidal. He wasn't unstable. He was obsessed with the dolls, the whispers, the myth of the Cannibal Sisters. And now so was she. The wind had grown colder, sharper, trees bent in submission, clouds hung low like bloated corpses. Yuki stood before the old schoolhouse, at the edge of Nagoro, where dozens of handmade dolls filled the classroom. Some sat at desks, others leaned against walls. They looked almost human, until you looked too long. She reached into her coat and removed an old cracked cassette recorder. It had belonged to June. The last tape had been recorded hours before he vanished. The audio was mostly static, except for the final 30 seconds when he whispered, "They don't just eat people, they eat who we are. They keep our stories." Then a long pause, and finally, barely audible, "The harvest begins at midnight. They always take the one who looks too long." Yuki turned toward the nearby shrine, the one locals never entered, the one hidden behind makeshift barricades and keep-out signs long since bleached white by time. The last step felt heavier than the rest, like the ground itself resisted her approach. Inside, it was quiet, no echo, no air, just rot. She wandered deeper, flashlight sweeping across rusted offerings and broken charms. But in the center of the shrine, a stone platform, and on it, a wooden tray, meat, fresh, raw, still steaming in the cold air. Yuki choked back bile, then noticed something beside it, a folded paper with handwriting she knew too well. June's. It said simply, "You have to choose. If you want answers, leave part of yourself here. A memory, a name, a truth." Yuki backed away, heart pounding. It had to be a trick, had to be staged. She turned, and that's when she saw them, the sisters, standing at the entrance. Two small figures, white kimonos, black hair, pale skin, hands by their sides, identical, eyes empty. They said nothing, didn't move, but Yuki felt something ripple in her head, like a hand brushing through her mind, searching. Suddenly, she was 9 years old again, crying in a hospital hallway, her mother's death, the sterile lights, the scent of iodine. She tried to shake it, but it wasn't a memory anymore. It was being ripped from her views, sucked out, devoured. The sisters stepped forward. Yuki dropped to her knees. "Take whatever you want," she whispered. "Just let me see him." The temperature dropped. The candles flickered and snuffed themselves out. Then out of the shadows, someone appeared. June, or something like June. He looked the same, but his eyes were too still, his smile too precise. His voice was flat. "You shouldn't have come." Yuki trembled. "Is it you?" He tilted his head. "I remember being him." She crawled forward. "What did they do to you?" "I gave them my story. I had to. They were starving. Every 20 years they wake, and if there's no offering, they take the whole village." Yuki's breath caught. "So the villagers knew." He nodded. "We fed them outsiders, drifters, travelers, just enough to buy peace." Tears streamed down her face. "You let them take you." He reached out, touched her cheek, cold as stone. "They let me watch. Now I help them find more." The sisters stepped closer again. June stepped back. Yuki stared into their eyes, saw centuries of hunger, of memory, of feasts carved from forgotten flesh. And then the world twisted. The shrine vanished. She stood in a field now. Dolls everywhere, hung from trees, buried in the soil. Their eyes glowed faintly under the harvest moon. In the distance, a procession, dozens of villagers, carrying candles, approaching the shrine, heads bowed. They were chanting, "We give what is not ours, so we may be spared." Yuki watched as the villagers placed objects into a wooden box. Teeth, hair, blood, then photographs, diaries, voice recordings, every piece of a person's life, sacrifices. And then she saw the victims, bound, blindfolded, struggling. The sisters appeared, smiling. The first victim's scream was short. The feast was long. Yuki dropped to her knees, screaming, but no one heard. She was invisible, a witness, not a savior. And then it all faded. She was back in the shrine, gasping, shaking. But now, she understood. The harvest was never just about feeding on flesh. It was about erasing people, devouring their history, their identity, their presence in the world. June had vanished, because they consumed his narrative. He no longer existed in memory, in record. Only Yuki remembered him, and even that was fading. She staggered outside. Morning had broken, but the village was different, brighter, fresher, rebuilt. The dolls were gone. The people were alive, smiling. Too much. They looked at her like she didn't belong. And then she understood why. They had harvested again. They had been fed, and she was the only one who remembered the cost. Yuki fled into the mountains. She documented everything. Photos, notes, videos, uploaded to a hidden server, sent to 10 journalists. But one by one, they stopped responding. A week later, her blog was taken down, her phone deactivated. She called her editor. He asked, "Who is this?" Her name was gone from his memory. She was being erased. Now she lives in hiding. Each night she recites her name, her story, over and over, trying to hold on to who she is. And she warns anyone who listen. They don't kill you, they consume you. And once they eat your story, it's like you were never real at all. But nobody believes her, until they dream of the sister, until they look too long at the dolls, until it's harvest time again. The train rattled along the tracks into the mist-choked valleys of Shikoku. A young man, Kaito, sat near the back of the nearly empty car, staring blankly out the window. He held a tattered notebook in his lap, one he'd found buried under loose floorboards in the back room of a bookstore in Osaka. The pages were stained, water-warped, nearly unreadable, but something about it had gripped him instantly. The handwriting was frantic, pages filled with desperate warnings, spirals of dates, names crossed out mid-sentence. In the back there were photos, blurred images of a forgotten village, twisted dolls nailed to trees, 2 girls in white kimonos, always watching. One name was repeated again and again, Yuki Taira. Kaito wasn't sure why it mattered. He didn't know her, had never read her work. No records came up in searches, no author bio, No articles, even her supposed website, archived only once years ago, now redirected to a dead page. She didn't exist, not anymore. But that only made the pull stronger. Nagoro wasn't on any modern maps, but the train conductor, an older man, with a hollow stare, nodded slightly when Kaito asked. Last stop, he muttered, but you won't find what you think you're looking for. The train groaned to a stop hours later at a crumbling platform swallowed by forest. Kaito stepped off, alone. The air was still. The world felt unnaturally quiet. He followed the notebook's scribbled instructions, along a narrow path, lined with overgrown bushes and rusted road signs, most too faded to read. Hours passed before he saw the village, or what remained of it. Weather-worn rooftops poked through the trees like gravestones. But the strangest part wasn't the decay, it was the lack of decay. Every structure was frozen in time, like someone had preserved the village in wax and forgotten to tell the world. Kaito wandered into the center. There were no people, only dolls, dozens of them, maybe 100, perched on benches, standing in doorways, sitting at bus stops, each one uniquely dressed, each with lifeless, hand-painted eyes. They weren't dusty or old, they were fresh, maintained, like someone still cared for them. Kaito swallowed hard, and pulled out a camera, snapped a few pictures. Then he turned toward the mountainside shrine, the one no one spoke about online, the one never photographed. Inside the shrine, the air was thick with incense and mold. He saw remnants of offerings, bones, teeth, hair bundles tied with red string. And then he found it, a stone altar, blackened from age, with a doll laid across it like a sacrifice. Kaito stepped closer. The doll had human hair, real. Its eyes were sewn shut with red thread, lips parted just slightly, as if trying to speak. His breath caught. Behind him, footsteps. He turned, and saw her, or what had once been her, Yuki Taira, but not alive, not fully dead. She stood at the threshold, skin gray and waxen, like she'd been sculpted from ash and memory. Her eyes flickered like failing light bulbs. Her mouth moved soundlessly, and then words formed. They found me. I spoke too loud. Kaito dropped the camera. Are you? She stepped forward. They erased my name from the world. I'm just a shadow now. But you still have yours. Leave while you remember who you are. Kaito stared at her. Why do they do it? Yuki's voice cracked. They're not spirits. They're not human. They're something older. We call them the sisters. But they were never girls. They were born from hunger, from grief, from the need to consume and be remembered. The villagers made a pact. Feed them a story, a life, and be spared. Every 20 years, the harvest begins again. Kaito stepped back. And the dolls, they're not decorations. They're prisons. They hold what's left of the ones who are taken. A face, a piece of a soul, a reminder. Suddenly, behind her, two small figures emerged from the dark hallway, identical, white robes, hair down to their waists, hands stained red. The sisters. They didn't speak, they only stared. Kaito's mind exploded with visions, 1,000 memories not his own, children taken, villagers watching in silence, screams stitched into doll mouths, each memory clawed at his mind, trying to make a home there. The sisters stepped forward, and Yuki did the unthinkable. She stood between them and Kaito. You can't have him. He's not part of this cycle. The air pulsed with a force Kaito couldn't understand. The dolls around the shrine twitched, their heads turning ever so slightly. Yuki turned to him. Run, he did. Through the trees, through the mud, the shadows. He didn't look back. Behind him he heard a sound, not a scream, a tearing, like fabric ripping through flesh and time. When Kaito finally reached the station, the train was already waiting. No one else was aboard. He boarded, sat, shaking. The train pulled away. He thought he had escaped, but when he got home, the pictures were gone. The notes he'd written in the margins of the notebook had vanished. His name didn't appear on his work computer login anymore. His girlfriend didn't recognize him. His landlord said his apartment had been rented to someone else months ago. He was being forgotten. The harvest had marked him. Now, Kaito records his story on scraps of paper, carves it into walls, whispers it into the ears of the homeless, and forgotten. He knows it's only a matter of time. But before he disappears completely, he wants you to know, if you see a doll sitting where no doll should be, on a bench, in a tunnel, in the corner of a shrine. Don't look into its eyes. If you find a village that isn't on a map, where no birds sing, and the wind feels too still, turn around. If you ever dream of two girls in white standing at your door, whispering your name, it's already too late, because the Cannibal Sisters of Nagoro don't just eat people, they consume your place in the world, and you will be forgotten forever. In the forgotten folds of Japan's mountain shadows, Nagoro sits like a scar on the skin of the earth, a place where stories die, and memory is devoured. The Cannibal Sisters aren't just urban legends, they are a virus of the soul, feeding, not on flesh alone, but on your existence itself. Every 20 years, the world forgets a few more names: a blogger, a hiker, a curious wanderer, a writer named Yuki Taira. Not dead, not alive, just removed. So if you ever find yourself pulled toward a village that doesn't show up on GPS, if you stumble on dolls that seem too real, their eyes too watchful, and if you hear laughter echoing where no one should be, leave, forget, run, because the sisters never stopped feeding, and one day, they might come for you.